So for this one, like I said, download your grid exercise information, and this is the information that's going to find itself in your layout. I've already done this a couple of times. Here was my solution last year for the class. This was my radial design. Do you see my central radial points? Really easy. Everything goes to that one particular area. Notice how I treated the type and how I treated the photographs from here. The photographs are in frames, and the frames themselves move to that central point. The type is in a text frame that moves to the central point, or at least aligns itself to that central movement point. Even things can be rotated and placed. And then I did a bunch of colorful little shapes that also go to that central point. The main thing is it supports that one central focus and gives me movement throughout my design. As far as the angular design, this is what I came up with. This is just a solution. I'm still using a color scheme, but everything falls along the same kind of grid at a different angle. Everything stays within those angular grids, whether I had to rotate it or I had to place it within there. Even the contact information down there is the same. For today, here's my basic setup that I'll walk through. Let me show you the radial style of setup. First thing you need to do once you set up both of your artboards is you're going to create your lines for your grid. All I had to do was use my line segment tool and draw off the lines where I wanted it to go. Since I only have one central point, that's totally okay to start there and draw off from here. Remember, a grid isn't going to print, so I don't care if you use it or not. You can always break the grid. The grid is there to direct your attention. If you do want to use rounded guides, not rounded, rectangles, elliptical guides, there we go. You can do circles. My circles are created from that central point onward. Remember, you can actually hold down the Option key and that'll give you a circle from the center outward. Here's the first part. If I want to turn these into guidelines, into something that I can't click and drag around, I don't want to just lock it down, you can select your guides, select your lines, go up to View, down to Guides, and choose Make Guides. With those lines, they'll turn into your blue lines that you're normally used to working with. Same is true for over here. Rather than dragging a guide from your rulers like we've used before, well, this is okay if I want horizontal and vertical, but to create the to create the angle guides, the diagonal guides, create them, go down to Guide, choose Make Guides from there. They're light blue, but they'll stay in place wherever I'm working with. Pretty cool? All right, next step. Always, always put your text on there first. If you start off with pictures, if you start off with anything else, you're going to push away something that's important. You're going to try to be fitting all the important bits around your picture. If you put your text on here, determine what should be Papa Bear, what should be Mama Bear and Baby Bear, then you can fit your pictures around it. So everything on here has its own text box or has its own line type that I'm working with. Once I've got it on there, then I can start playing around with layout and design, color schemes, all these kinds of things. I'm not even worried with color right now. I can use this as my central point. Everything else is radiating from it in some particular way. Pretty cool? All this you already know how to do as far as setup. Once I get down there, then I can start tweaking the design, adding color, adding different elements. This right here I would not consider finished. If I had to give myself a grade, I would maybe a C or a B, because I know there's other things that I can add to this to make it stand out more, to make it more visually impactful. It's doing everything that I'm asking. It's got all the elements, it's got them in a radial design, but it doesn't add any more to it from there. As far as the colors that I chose, I used the department logo. Save those as color swatches, place them on here, then play around with your transparency, blend modes, those kinds of things to give that overlapping kind of appeal. I will leave it up to you how you want this to be designed. As long as you're using Illustrator and as long as you've got your radial or your angular design, that's what I'm looking for. Some other little details to pay attention to when working in Illustrator. Illustrator doesn't handle type very well. I do not recommend doing a type-heavy project in Illustrator, but you can still do a lot of things. Here's one of the common issues that you have when working with Illustrator's type. If I choose the Type tool and I click and drag, it gives me a type box, right? So if I typed out Mississippi College, I can make it bigger. Uh-oh. Okay, so it's inside of a type box. If I wanted to take this and rotate it, here's what's going to happen. A lot of people freak out when they see that. What happened when I rotated it?
The text stays horizontal.
Text stays horizontal. My box is what's rotating. That's because I created a text box. Now, to overcome this, there's two things you can do. You need to have this in what's called point type. If I was to use my type tool and just click once, I've got a point of type, and now I can start typing whatever. With point type, watch what happens if I try to rotate it now. The type itself will rotate. So how do I solve my problem? The newest version of Illustrator has this little handle off to the side. If I double click on it, it converts it to point type. You can see it got rid of my bounding box. And now I can actually rotate it, and it works out really, really well. So there's one thing that you can do. It becomes more tricky when you've got a whole paragraph that you actually want to keep inside of your text box. Again, if I tried to rotate it, it's going to rotate the box, but it's not going to rotate my type. That's actually kind of a cool little layout right there. You wouldn't want to have the V by itself, but it's, you know, it still fits the structure. Here's the other thing you can do. If you want to keep it inside of a text box, give yourself just another object. You can make a rectangle frame around it or just really anything. When you select both the object and your type and rotate it, check out what happens. Why is it doing that? Because it's got an extra object associated with it. It's treating them both as two different objects. It's just a little quirk that Illustrator does, but it's something you got to think about whenever you're placing your type into these structures. So if I wanted to rotate my text and fit it in this area, I've actually got to create either line type or I've got to put it inside of another shape to place it in there. Pretty cool? Okay. Second thing, if you actually want to place it inside of a custom shape, something that's not a rectangle, there's two things you can do. I'll copy this text. Actually, we'll cut it away. You can draw the shape that you want. So if I had, say, this trapezoid kind of shape, if I grab my type tool and click right on the edge of a shape, it's going to give me an insertion point which I can paste my text into. When you do this, notice it put it all the way over there. Why do you think it started there and not over here?
Because on the left side it's not actually high enough.
Bingo. This part on the right is higher than the left. So if I did that, you can see it starts at the highest point and goes down. So I need to make sure my shape starts higher on one end or the other. Same is true for rotating this. If I tried to rotate it, we'll make it a little bit bigger. If I tried to rotate this shape now, the shape will rotate, but the text will not. If I wanted to rotate this shape, how could I rotate this and keep it inside of there? Make it point type, or put a box around it. Put a box with it. Doesn't even have to go around it. Just as long as there's another object linked up with it, it'll rotate the text box.
What happens if you delete that object?
If you delete it, and I tried to rotate it now, it keeps the type that angle, but moves it back. It's really confusing. Exactly. Keep it simple. When I created this, I created the shape that I wanted first. So I would have drawn off, let's see if I can turn on my, I would have drawn off this shape. I would have then rotated this shape so the top edge is parallel with my artboard. Make sense? Now when I actually put my type into it, it stays relatively there. I may have to change it up. Then when it goes to rotating it to place into place, just give myself another object. When I rotate it, it fits. That was my solution to that one. I guarantee somebody's going to run into this and have to think it through. Take it one step at a time. The other thing you can do, if you do just have a basic text box, let's make another one up here. You can always use your white arrow tool, and if you only need 4 points, you can change the points on that text box and it will change up the style of that as well. Okay, here's the next thing to know. When you place, let's see, changing up columns of text, you don't have to be stuck with a single column of text. In Illustrator, actually gives you the option to create multiple columns and even do text wrapping. Let's say I wanted to break this up into 2 different columns. With it selected, you can go to Object, go to Type, and down to Area Type Options. Turn on my preview. Here's where I can divide things up into columns. I can even do some offset or inset. And if I need 2 or 3 different columns, it'll divide that up from there. Also, I have my gutter down here. So there's 2 columns of type I can work with.
I suppose you could actually change the angle of the columns too, could you?
Probably not. See, even if I rotate this, the angle of the column stays vertical along with this. You can suggest that as an Adobe update. I'll let you do that.
Was this 16?
Say again?
Did you update?
No, this is still 15.
Okay.
Still 15. Other things to pay attention to if you do want to turn off your hyphenations. Remember, you've got your character palette up here. You got your paragraph palette, come on, right here. There's hyphenate. We can take that off and work within that. Final thing, placing pictures inside of actual areas. To do this, you've got to know how to make what's called a clipping mask. In our case, if I wanted to, let's say I made a shape, and I wanted to put a picture inside of this shape right here. Close it off. Get our picture. Let's do Mr. Gregory. Say I want to place Mr. Gregory's photograph into my design. I've got my shape and I've got my picture. I need to have my shape on top of my photograph or whatever I want to clip it to. So I'm going to bring that to the front. And now I can kind of give a rough placement for where it needs to be. Have I lost everybody just yet? Make sense? So I've got it here. When I select both of them, the shape and the picture, go to Object, Clipping Mask is what I want, and we'll make a clipping mask. Notice now it's clipped inside of the shape. Pretty cool. And I can actually move the shape around and it treats it as one particular object. If I need to edit what's inside of this mask, I can double click. And what's it called when you double click on something? Brings you into this mode. Isolation mode, bingo. In isolation mode, I can move it around. I can rescale things that are inside of it. You can have multiple objects. And then when I'm done, just click an empty area and it'll go back into regular mode to where you can move it around as well. Did I lose everybody on that one? Real simple. Keep it simple. I try to give you the steps as well. Final thing, or next to final thing, there is text wrap. Let's say I wanted this circle to wrap the text that's here. Select the object. Text wrap is actually found under your object as well. Down, there it is right here. Text wrap, and we'll make some text wrap. When I turn on make, you can see my extra outline and it pushed the text out of the way. If you want to alter that, under text wrap, here's the text wrap options where you can increase it or decrease it as necessary. Say OK. There it goes with there. Not the easiest. In InDesign, it gives you a little bit more options, a little more free control, but you can do that in Illustrator. Here's the final thing everybody wanted to know how to do. I'll go back to this one to show you. If you ever want to cut something, and in this case I chose the font and I clipped off the edges of it to match my angular grid. To do a cutting of an object, let's say I typed out the word art. Oops. Type, A-R-T. Make it larger so we can see it. Remember, your type can be converted to outlines. Under Type, Create Outlines. And now I've actually got the vectors to work with. I use my line segment tool to draw off where I want to cut things through. I can draw several different segments. Whenever I select both the lines and my artwork, so now notice I've got my lines and literally the word art, I use my Shape Builder tool to erase things away. With Shape Builder, if I was to hold down Option, do you see the little plus sign on my cursor? With Option held down, I can click on an area to erase it away. And so very quickly I've got areas that are cut off. And that's how I was able to do it for here. If I want to recolor an area, say Mississippi and Department up here, let's bring everything back. If I want to recolor it, I can keep my regular tool, say I chose this orange. Without holding Option down, I've got my plus sign. I can click on an area and it recolors just that area. It actually creates a different shape for it to work in. If I clicked on them individually, I can move them around and do something like that. The Shape Builder tool, the whole purpose of this tool is to quickly build out or cut away different areas of shapes. The magic part of that is you've got to have the shapes selected in order to affect those particular objects. If I didn't,
You can change the color that way.
yeah, change up your color and click on it. Whatever your fill color is selected, that's what it will build it out.
I always slice them apart
Yeah.
and then recolor.
You've been using the Pathfinder tool and everything
Yeah.
from that. This takes a lot of the guesswork out of Pathfinder. With Pathfinder, you kind of have to know, well, which one do I click on?
Right.
Use your Shape Builder tool. You'll know exactly what you're doing. Just remember to select the objects and either use Option to erase or not use Option to recolor or add things together. What I'm looking for from these, one layout with radial, one layout with an angular style of grid. The first thing you need to do is make your grid. Draw off your lines, convert them to guidelines, then start placing your text and your other elements inside of there. When you're finished, you're going to save this as a PDF and upload it to Moodle. Cool. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to y'all and let y'all get started.